All right, welcome back. Today we are going to talk about snipers. In this Tactica video, we're going to look at their role, why to use them, how to use them, and what makes a good sniper. Little intro here. I love snipers. I love putting them in my 350 list. I like having the option of having them there to then pull them into a 250 list to use them in a variety of missions. I think they excel in a variety of missions. They also have some drawbacks, but they do. They add a lot of flexibility to your force and can be really, really good at helping you get an advantage over your opponent in a lot of different missions and a lot of different play styles. And I think if you play them right, they can really be advantageous for you. Just like if you play in direct fire right or your hovercraft right, and things we've talked about before. But in this, we're going to talk about snipers. So let's talk about their role and why we use them. So a sniper is a unit that is dedicated to engaging your opponent's units at long range with the goal of degrading your opponent's force before it can engage with your units. So, as most of you know who've played 350 before, or Alpha Strike in many of its other formats as well, most of the fighting, the hard fighting, happens at medium range, right? The sniper, though, his main focus is engaging the opponent at long range and trying to degrade his force. So that when that fight starts at medium range, that the main battle starts at medium range, your opponent is degraded. Maybe they're down 10, 15, 20% of their hit points, or they've lost a unit or two. And what this is going to do is it's going to give you an advantage at medium range. The other thing it does is, if you play your cards right and tactically play your cards right, is that when you start engaging at medium range, you're going to have these long range units that are engaging at long range be able to support your medium range engagement in such a way that it gives you an upper hand. So if you can take out 20, 30 points of units before the fight even starts, you're giving yourself an advantage, right? You can also use them to dictate your enemy's movement, or at least influence their ability to move. You can very effectively use snipers to cover your own objectives in the backfield, or to provide covering and supporting fire as you assault or attack a specific sector of the field or objective. And then the other thing is that, because if you play them right and they're doing their job correctly and they're doing damage, and we'll talk about how we do that here in a second, is they can act as a distraction and they can divert enemy attention away from your main attack, away from where you're pushing objectives. Because if your opponent's dumping fire into your snipers in the backfield and not into your units that are actually threatening the objective, you've kind of won, right? But if they don't shoot the snipers, you've also kind of won. So you're putting your opponent in a position where they're making bad choices. So this is kind of the role that they have, and this is why we use them. All right, so now that we've talked about why we want to use a sniper, we're going to talk about how to use our snipers. First is terrain setup. Now remember, we talked about this in other videos on how to play Alpha Strike. The game always starts with terrain setup, right? Especially in 350, where you cooperatively build the board. So terrain is going to dictate where your sniper spends most of the time in the game. My goal for my snipers, and I think this should be yours too, is that they only move once for the whole game, and that's turn one. Very, very rarely should your sniper be having to relocate and reposition. If they're doing that, then you didn't have a good position to begin with, and the terrain wasn't set up great to begin with. So turn one, they move into position, and that's where they sit. And you're either going to move them into woods or you're going to move them onto a hill. If you can get into both, that's great. I typically don't stack my woods on hills. I know a lot of people do that. I don't like doing it because it takes away, you're condensing the cover. You end up with more openness, which you might think is great for a sniper, which it can be, but it can also be bad for your general attack. It can make your attack more precarious because you don't have as much stuff to hide behind as you advance. And really what we're doing with the snipers, we want to use distance as its main form of protection. And then our main attack, to be its other form of protection, i.e., it's more important to kill these things that are on the objective to kill that sniper in the backfield. So I generally, personally, prefer the hill. I like to be up on top of a hill. I'll put a hill down where I want my sniper to be. I'll then deploy my sniper behind the hill to begin with. I'll move up on top of it. I like the hill personally because it gives me the best field of view, right? I can see everything. Woods gives me a little bit of cover, but even something like a level 1 hill can limit my line of sight on a lot of my snipers. Next is going stationary. Like I said, I move turn 1, I go stationary, and I'm going to be taking aimed shots, right? My sniper's looking down its scope, picking its best shots. I'm taking full advantage of those shots, right? So if I'm a skill 4 sniper and I'm stationary, that goes to skill 3, but I'm at long range. Now I'm at 7s. My opponent's a 2 for his TMM. Now I'm at 9s, right? So instead of 10s, I'm 9s, which is great. But if I go down to skill 3, now I'm 8s. Shooting someone at 8s at long range is awesome, right? That's a really good target number for shooting those. That's basically medium range engagement. So you're taking advantage of going stationary to artificially get your skill down, right? Now the risk to this, of course, is that you don't have a TMM. So when I buy my snipers and I build them out, I'm typically looking at stuff that has low TMM, TMM 0, TMM 1, because then I don't care if they go stationary because they are already a slow unit to begin with that we're going to get, that they don't have that defense from movement, right? But going stationary is super key in using your snipers, and also keeping your distance from your opponent's units and keeping at long range as long as you can is also really important. And you do this through your own positioning by not moving too far up the board, but also by pressing the attack and being very aggressive with your skirmishers to push the main engagement, that medium range engagement we talked about, into the middle board or even into their half. And that's going to help keep that distance from your sniper. That's going to protect them even better. The one thing you don't want to do with a sniper is piecemeal your force in. So what I mean is you by this is, you set your sniper up, or maybe you have 2 snipers up on a hill, and then you kind of slowly advance and you hide your other stuff and you give your opponent time to just focus on the snipers and wipe them out, right? This piecemealing effect and not giving your opponents other threats and other priority targets is going to expose your snipers to risks, because they will draw fire if they're causing hits on your opponent, right? And this is not good. You want to put your opponent in tough position where they have to make hard decisions, where the decision is wrong either way, right? Your snipers need to be providing that covering fire and providing that threat to your advancing force. So your force, instead of hiding as they advance, they can be a little more exposed because they have that sniper providing covering fire, and your opponent has to then make this decision. And if they decide to shoot at the snipers at long range instead of your Ostol, right, that's coming up the board, then that Ostol effectively was properly supported, and he's able to make it up the board more aggressively because he's got this good covering fire. You might ask, now what about digging in? Why would you dig in? Can you dig in? And certainly you can. I see a lot of guys do this. They dig in. It gives that sniper a little extra protection. My problem with digging in is if you fail to dig in, then you have to try again the next turn, and then the whole time you're moving, so you're not quite taking advantage of being stationary as long as you might otherwise, right? And so you're reducing the combat effectiveness of the sniper. So I generally will put my sniper up on a hill, go stationary, and then fire away from that position without digging in. Now, the other advantage that you can have is your sniper is going to be going stationary, is you can use them as an initiative sink. I know that my opponent knows my sniper is going to be stationary. I know my sniper is going to be going stationary. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to burn my sniper every turn going stationary to force him to activate before the stuff that is maneuvering and attacking, it does its moving. So think of your sniper as also a initiative sink as well. All right, a couple other tactical considerations for your sniper is going to be using them to counter other snipers. So this is engaging your opponent. If he brings snipers, is engaging them, because if they're also using a sniper and going stationary and they're a low TMM unit and you've got a sniper, you're going to be getting very easy, reliable hits on them, and you'll have the ability to counter sniper them and eliminate them. So this is another tactical consideration, how to use them. The other is hover counter. You do get into your TMM 4s and 5 hovercraft, but a lot of hovercraft are only TMM 3, right? And so if you're a TMM 3 hovercraft and you're at medium range, that makes you a 5 to hit, but you're stationary and a skill 3 sniper. Now you're only needing 7s to hit them at medium range. Those are really good odds. Now let's say you're dishing 3 damage at medium range and you're shooting at some hovercraft that only take 6, you're taking a big chunk out of them. And more importantly, like you're getting those motive hits, which is what really hurts hovercraft, is taking those motive hits. So snipers can be really good anti-hovercraft units. I find, especially in missions like capture the flag, they really shine because as your opponent is approaching the center objectives, they have to come into that medium range. And then as they're running away, you still have the ability to reach out and affect them. And the other thing is I like to, and we'll talk about this here in a second, I like to run my snipers, I like to make sure they have turrets. So sorry, I don't really care to run mechs, but I like to make sure they have turrets because then those hovercraft can't sneak up on you. And if a hovercraft wants to come in within short range and shoot me for 3 in the rear, that's all right because I'm going to obliterate you with my turret. Snipers can also be very good at covering objectives. Of course they are, because they can, they're going stationary, they have a low skill, and they have the ability to cover those objectives, to put shots on them, to if you, especially if you build your sniper nest right, you should be building it to where you have line of sight to those objectives that you're most wanting to protect, and they can cover those objectives and act as an anchor for your assault force to move forward. And the other thing is that even though they're anchored in the back, they can do a really good job of bodyguarding units. So you can, like go back to hovercraft, is you can be in a situation where you might be advancing of the board and your rear is exposed to hovercraft as you're advancing, just because of the nature of how hovercraft work. But if you have a sniper providing covering shots to that rear, it may dissuade your opponent from moving his hovercraft into that area to get that extra shot at point blank range, because they know their hovercraft is going to get drilled by a sniper that's perched up on a hill. Or conversely, you might be able to use your rear arc on a mech to bait hovercraft into an area that is being covered by your snipers. So those are other considerations to use on how to use snipers, is eliminating those hovercraft or providing protection from those hovercraft. So let's now look at what are the things that I look for and I think you should look for in a sniper. First is I want them to be skill 3. And the reason I want them to be skill 3 is so that when they're stationary, they're skill 2. I don't care to take a unit that's a sniper if I'm just going to be running them at skill 4. I'm going to leave that to my skirmishers, my units that are going after objectives, who are fighting in the middle. I just don't find the advantage that you get from being skill 3 when stationary. So a skill 4 unit that's stationary, skill 3. I don't find that advantage to being that great, but when you're skill 3 and you go stationary, now you're skill 2. That really makes those shots, those long range shots, reliable, right? And then as far as my shots go, I'm looking for a minimum of 3 shots at long range. 1 is none, 2 is 1. That's the hard rule on long range. If you're running 2 or fewer, I'm sorry, you don't have a sniper. You have a plink gun. You have something that is throwing lawn darts in the dark. Like, it's not reliable. It's not great. You want at least 3 shots at medium range, or not at medium range, at long range. Sorry. 3 shots minimum at long range. Anything else lower than that is totally worthless. Then at skill 3, what I like to see, that rule of 10, the 10 points at medium that a lot of guys like to run for their mechs as a rule, kind of a rule of thumb, that 10 points at medium range. I like to see 10 points at long range at skill 3. So if I can run something and be around 10 points per shot at long range while being skill 3, that's your sweet spot for a good unit to be a sniper, right? I like to have a minimum of 7 hit points. This is the bare minimum I'll run on a sniper. So what this means is I'm not going to run something like an LRM carry as a sniper, even though you could, but it only has 5 hit points and they just die too fast. I find 7 is kind of the sweet spot where, a lot of mechs are only rocking 3 or 4 shots at medium range. And so that's going to take the dedicated firepower of probably a minimum of 3 units over the course of 2 turns to take that sniper out, right? Because it's got 7 hit points. So if I've got 3 units doing 3 each, or let's just round it up and say it's 10, and they hit with half, that's 5 hits in a single turn on that thing. The next turn, they'll probably eliminate it, but they've had to dedicate 2 rounds of shooting from at least 3 units one turn and maybe to the next turn, right? So I like at least 7. If you can get to 8 or 9 or 10, it's even better, but then you start getting expensive. So oftentimes shaving some points and sacrificing hit points can be how you do it. But 7 is a good number. I really like turreted. If you're not running turreted, if you find something that you like but it's not turreted, I think it's a risk personally because you don't have the protection from hovercraft or really light fast mechs that can get behind you, and you just don't have the full range of visibility to attack stuff, especially if like stuff gets behind you or off to the side of you, and they're on an objective. You can't cover as much. When you're turreted, it's 360, right? And remember that 3 long range needs to be in the turret. It can't be 3 at long but only 1 in the turret, right? I personally like low TMM of 1 or 0, and the reason is that it's already low. They're already not fast. I don't really need them to be moving. You're spending points on that speed. I don't really need them to be moving, like I said, but also if I go stationary, I don't care. Like, to be honest with you, if I'm TMM 1 and I go stationary and I go down to TMM 0, I don't care. Like that +1 does not make or break or make that huge of a difference for me. And you're relying on that distance, that long range to be your protection, or the fight in the middle to be a distraction that's going to protect you. Even better if you can stomach it and take something that's a TMM 0. That thing, it doesn't matter. Like, it wants to be stationary anyways. So its speed, not spending points on speed, is a way to shave down the points and to get more point effective shots. Anything extra that it can bring, as long as it isn't overly costed. This is going to be stuff like ECM. Like, if you can find a sniper that provides an ECM bubble, that way that if someone's running C3, they can't just kill you with their C3 units. Flak, indirect fire, stealth, and C3 are all things that I like to look for. Of course, things like haste and energy are always awesome because it makes you crit resistant, but those are things we like on all of our units. I'm going to just make a comment really quick on indirect fire. If you can find something that's got that 7 hit points and also does a minimum of 3 at long range and brings an IF element to it, I think those are low key, like, super good. And the main one I like is the partisan LRM carrier. And the reason I like it is because you have the hit points to sit up in a sniper's nest and expose yourself and shoot direct fire. But if your opponent decides to hide, he actually can't, because you can IF him. In this case, I really like the partisan LRM because the IF is the same as the long range damage at 4. Or if you do, I think the refit, we're going to talk about it here in a second, is a 5 at long, so 5 and then 5 IF. You can still drop that IF, so you get a little more tactical flexibility with them, but you are spending points. Other consideration is a wingman, and these wingmen are not bodyguards; they're like sniper wingman. Think of it how like a sniper team operates. They both are snipers, but while one's spotting, the other one's shooting, but they can also both be snipers. This would be 2 snipers. I typically will only do this if they're like 3 at long range. You run 2 units that can both do 3 at long range that are relatively cost effective. I don't run like 2 alicorns, right, that are just 5 at long range. You're just putting too many points into your snipers. But if you're running something like a partisan refit that's like, or a Shrek PBC, the anti-infantry, which are both like 23 point base, I think they get up to like 30 or 28 when you go skill 3. You're still keeping your point cost low, but you're getting like that extra sniper fire, right? More shots, basically. You also can split targets, and you can focus fire, and then you can cover more boards. You also get more activations. Try not to spend more than, kind of along with this, try not to spend more than 20% of your points. So, or no more than around 50 points on snipers. If you start spending more than that on your snipers, you're going to lose tactical flexibility on the battlefield to be able to maneuver and take objectives. This is just what I have found. And then it'll really slow you down. That's the other big thing. So because these units are just units that move up and then sit, the rest of your force has to be able to move. So I'm going to avoid taking probably any movement 6 or 8 units in addition to my snipers. I'm going to really focus on My skirmishers, my solid skirmishers here, my solid move 10 mechs and scout mechs or scout units. But really those skirmishers to make up the bulk of the rest of the force. I want stuff that can maneuver, get onto the objective, that have good hit points, but also good damage output. And they're the ones we're gonna run forward while the snipers support them. So here's a couple things that I would avoid when it comes to snipers is units that are really expensive. And we've kind of already touched on this. We want to keep the points very effective because what we're really doing is we're buying shots. We're not buying a lot of anything else. We don't want to spend a lot of money on other things. We want to buy those long range shots. And we want to be able to effectively put them downrange. So I'm not going to take speed. I'm not going to take stuff that's TMM 2, 3, or 4 and put them in that role as a sniper. This doesn't mean you can't have stuff that doesn't do long range damage that has those higher TMMs. Although I probably personally wouldn't run that stuff or really focus in on that. I think that it's kind of a waste, especially when you're moving that quick. But you don't want to be taking something that does like 5 damage at long range that's a TMM 2 or 3 because you're not going to use it, right? And you're not going to go stationary. Those units, their defense comes from their speed as much as it does from their health, right? But their speed is what really, really gets them going, and you really want to be moving around. You don't want to be stationary. So I would never consider something that's TMM 3 or 4 to be a long range damage dealer, right? The other thing, I don't know, some people have mixed feelings on this. I generally don't take mechs as snipers. I want my mechs brawling. I want my mechs maneuvering. I want them closing with the enemy at some point. I want them like really squatting on objective and duking it out. And I just don't think for the price, the mechs that fill that sniper role are as cost effective. I'm going to give you an example here. I just pulled a couple units from the Merc list out of Clan Invasion, right? Merc because it grabs the most stuff, right? And then Clan Invasion because it's the most common. So if I take a Shrek anti-infantry, it's 23 points. It's 28 for skill 3. It has 7 hit points and it moves 6. It's 333 and has a turret. The cheapest mech that does 333 that could be used as a sniper is a Blackjack. It's 29 points. It moves 8 with a jump, but that's at skill 4. I've got to go all the way up to 35 points to be skill 3. So it's so much more expensive. You're spending 7 more points to get the same sniper ability, and you don't even have turret, right? The points are almost identical just to be skill 4. If you go to something bigger, let's say like a Marauder 2, at skill 3, a Marauder 2 is like 52 points. It moves 6, so it's as fast as a Shrek, and it's only 333. And it brings flak, but for 56 points, I can take a Shrek and a partisan refit. So for 4 more points, I can be dealing 666 damage with a skill 3. I still get the flak because the partisan refit has flak, which is awesome. And it has the same hit points. That Marauder 2 has 14 hit points. A Shrek and a partisan are 7 each for 14 hit points. So I just think that using your mechs as snipers can be not as effective just because of the cost involved. The only exception I've ever made to this rule is the Stealth Atlas. But this is because I use the Stealth Atlas not just as a sniper, but I use him as like my CEO and headhunter. And I use him to like sit on objectives and just be a giant like son of a gun to remove. And I'm trying to make things as frustrating as possible for my opponent because of that combination of like 18 hit points and stealth. And he's only 444, so you're spending a lot of points on a 444. Now you can use him as a sniper because you're probably stationary, but you're not really dedicating him, that Stealth Atlas, as a sniper. Like you're going to, dedicate some of these vehicles that we're going to talk about here in a little bit that are very cost effective, that can really put the hurt on and really effectively degrade your opponent. Missions. So let's look at missions. I think that snipers particularly excel at a couple missions. 4 of them in particular are my favorite to take them in. That is stand-up fight. And I like them in stand-up fight because stand-up fight is not a rush towards objectives in the middle. And sometimes the main engagement at medium range can be a little more standoffish. So your opponent is not forced to come across the board or come into the middle of the board if he doesn't have to. And if you push the fight up, with your stuff very aggressively into the middle board and kind of pin him to his backfield, then your snipers kind of shine because they can still engage at that long range. And so I think they do pretty good in stand-up fight. In fact, I think they do really good in stand-up fight. I think they really excel in capture the flag because your opponent's hovercraft usually cannot run or hide from them. So when they're running away, you can still hit them. But when they come into the middle, they end up being at medium range to your snipers. And so your sniper stationary, he's a 2, medium range is a 2, and then they're only like a 3. And if you built the board right, they're exposed on the objective. So you're hitting their hovercraft and they're fast stuff that's trying to take the objective, i.e. the flag. And you're just able to just drill them with those snipers. I like them in domination because your opponent is forced to have two if they're playing the game right, they've got guys camping on the backfield on the back 2 objectives that are in their back half. And you can sit there while they camp back there and from long range just pile it on. And so you can really focus down one of those objectives and then bum rush it, right? And really just swamp that one of the 2 objectives or clear them out of the backfield. Like let's say they come up and they only leave 1 unit on the backfield. You can really hammer them with your snipers and then use a fast unit to go capture that. And the other one is hold the line. And that's because your snipers already want to be stationary and then hold the line. You're going to have, say you had 2 snipers, you're just going to squat right on those, one of the 3 objectives that are on your line. And then your opponent is also going to have guys squatting on the objectives on their line. And so you're going to have these snipers trying to eliminate across the board that already want to be stationary, eliminating units that are forced to be stationary across the board. If your opponent doesn't have snipers that can respond to that, you're going to slowly degrade them to where you expose their objectives and get on them. The other missions, they're decent at. I'm not going to say they can or can't be used. I don't think they're like particularly great at bunkers, only because of the mobility issues, although they can do well at covering your rear bunker and being a deterrent. But I don't think that they're a must-have in bunkers. I think they really struggle in King of the Hill because although they dish out the damage, they're too slow to get on the middle objective, and that game just devolves into a tag team match in the middle. And that is really, I don't want to say unfortunate, but like it means that the sniper can be mitigated, and because his points are being used in the backfield and not on the center objective, his weight isn't counted. And so your opponent, if they can get control of that center objective, even with him doing damage, it can be too little too late. All right, so now we're going to look at some units that I like to take and I would recommend as good candidates for snipers. This isn't the end all. There's lots of other units out there, but these are the ones I most commonly take, or friends of mine most commonly take, and they recommended. The first is my favorite of all time, and it is the Partisan Heavy Tank Refit. All these, I'm going to give you the point values. All these are point valued at skill 3. So at skill 3, this thing is 28 points. It is 333 with 7 hit points. It has flak 111, which is awesome. You're picking up that extra ability. It is turreted, and it is turreted 233. Now, its counterpart to this that a lot of guys run because it's in plastic is the Shrek PPC carrier. There are 2 variants of the Shrek that I like to run if I run them. That can be used as a sniper. First is the regular PPC carrier. It's 30 points at skill 3. It's 333. It has 8 HP, and it's a turret with 333. So it is it's got 1 more hit point than that Partisan. So it's at 8 instead of 7. And it has, at short range, it's got an extra shot in the turret, which can be an advantage. If you got 2 points to spare, why not take it? And if you don't think you need flak, why not take it? I personally like the refit because it can be used as a flak vehicle. Now, the Shrek that I run most commonly, because I like to shape points and pick up little points here and there, it gives me more flexibility. I feel like in building my 250 lists and then building my ultimate 350 list, is the anti-infantry Shrek, which is 28 points and 333 with 7 HP and a turret of 333. So you're basically losing flak, but picking up an extra shot at short range. I understand why you might take it. Personally, I think the refit's better because it has flak. I don't like that, that you go down to 2 at short range, but something's got to be in your rear. Now, with the changes to WolfNet not allowing you to run duplicates on vehicles, I'm typically running an anti-infantry Shrek now, and I'll pair it with the partisan refit, so I get the flak in there, which can be pretty. It's still a pretty good combo of guys. You're still getting the 3-3-3. It's still 28 points per unit, and I think that's really, really, really good. The next unit that I like to run is the Partisan Heavy Tank, the LRM variant, which is 36 points at skill 3. It's 3-4-4, 7 hit points. It's 2-4-4 in the turret, but it has IF4, and the IF4 is also in the turret. So what's great about this is that your opponent may run, but he cannot hide. And because of how basically because he's got IF, like you can still hit them even if they get behind like a tree, or not trees, but like buildings or a hill or something like that, and they get out of line of sight. As long as you can drive line of sight, you can still drop that IF. So it gives you more flexibility, but you are paying 8 more points, but you get the IF and you're picking up a 4 at long range for 36 points, which is pretty good. The big daddy of them all is the Alicorn Mark 6. It's 47 points. It's 4-5-5. This is a very, 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 very popular sniper tank in our meta. Typically, I would only run one of these. I've seen guys, when the rules were the rule of 2, run 2 of them. They have a boatload of hit points. They basically don't die during a game. They got 12 hit points total. It's 8 and 6. No, it's 7 and 5 for 12 hit points. They're really, really good. 4-5-5 in the turret. They just last forever. They're very hard to kill. And then that 5 just hammering home can be really, really brutal. Really brutal. But I will point out that you can get, that Shrek and that Partisan, you get a flak out of that deal if you take the 2 of them, and you're only spending 9 more, and you're getting a 6-6-6 total with 14 total hit points. So you're picking up a little more to run 2 of those, which can be nice. I have paired an Alicorn with, like a Shrek and stuff. That can be nice too, but it starts getting really expensive. There's another variant. I don't see that I added it to the list, but there is another variant of the Partisan that's like a heavy LRM variant that shoots 5 at long and has IF5, and that's a good option as well. The next option is, I see it here. It is the Partisan Air Defense Tank that is LRM. It is 3-5-5. It is 50 points. It only has 9 hit points, but it is IF5 in the turret and IF5. So it's not going to give you the life expectancy of an Alicorn, but for a couple extra points, you get the IF5, which can be very tactically helpful. All right, so when I play my Comstar, I like to run these guys, and that is the Burke Defense Tank. At skill 3, he's 31 points. He's 3-4-4, so he's got 4 shots at long range for only 3 more points. Now his downside is he's only speed 4, which can be a little rough. But like I said, your goal should be to move turn 1 on top of a hill and then just sit there. But 31 points, so for 4 more points over a Shrek or a Partisan, you're picking up a 4th shot at long. You're still only 7 HP. Now you do lose a shot in the turret. You're only 3-3-3 in the turret instead of 3-4-4. But at least you maintain that short range at 3. But they can be really good. I really, really like taking them in my Comstar. One of the reasons I like taking them too is just because I like to mix things up. I don't like to run the same units all the time, and so the Burke's kind of it's a fun model to own. The other thing I'm going to note here is we're going to talk about some clanner stuff here. If you own a Burke model, then you can run it as the Koku Defense Tank, which is a clan sniper tank that I really like. And other people that play clans more often than I do also really like. It has 2 more hit points than the Burke. It's the same speed. It's 37 points at skill 3, but it's 4-4-4 and it's turret 4-4-4. So you're a little more survivable, and at short range you do a little more damage. It also has an IF1 for what it's worth. Probably not much, but you do have that extra IF. The other option is the Koku Defense Tank, the XL. It's 41 points. I think this is personally pushing the limits. You're getting over 10 points per shot, but it's not terrible. I mean, you're not like that much far over. You are speed 6 instead of speed 4. You're 4-4-4. You pick up an extra point of armor on this guy. So your total of 10, your IF1 and your 4-4-4 turret. So if you want to pick up 2 extra inches and an extra point of damage, you could go with the Koku Defense tank, the XL variant. The Ishtar Heavy Fire Support. Again, pushes the limits a little bit. It's 43 points. It's only 554, but it is speed 6. Now, the problem with him is he's wheeled, but he has good life at 9. He has flak also. His drawback is that his turret's only 333, but you are 554. So you're getting that 4 at long range, which is pretty decent for 43 points. When your opponent moves into medium, you're going up to 5. You also pick up a little bit of flak, which is not terrible. And then the last one I want to just highlight here is the Puma Assault Tank. 52 points, which is a lot of points, but he's got 11 health. He's 5'6", with a move of 3, and he has indirect fire 3. Downside to this guy is his turret is only 111. So there you have it. Those are just some examples. There's lots of other ones. All these were drawn from Clan Invasion because it's the most commonly played, and a lot of these are very ubiquitous across many time periods. I think, in a lot of ways, the clanners have advantages, in over the inner sphere in a lot of different categories. It's just like they get a little better. They're a little better at this, a little better at that. But I think when it comes to snipers, personally, I think the inner sphere does it better. I think you can get some really cheap, cost-effective sniper units out there. Sniper vehicles, combat vehicles that are really good. Again, I typically shy away from mechs and using them in a dedicated sniper role, just because of the cost that is involved with mechs. Because of their hit points, because of their move, because of everything that is a mech. But if you can find something that's good, one of the things that's nice about mechs is they stand tall, so you don't have to get them up on top of a hill. You can sit them behind a hill and still get cover. And then I do know there's a handful of infantry out there that have some decent long range shots. I think with infantry and battle armor, which you want to look at because it's very rare that you're going to find something that throws 3 at long range, is you probably want to find something that you can double up on that's cheap. So you run 2 units that say throw 2 at long range. Now you're technically throwing 4 at long range between those 2 units. They can support each other a little better. You got more reliable long range shots. But generally, I don't run a lot of infantry. I don't run a lot of battle armor, and I'm probably not going to run them as dedicated snipers like I would some of these vehicles. Hope you found this video helpful. I know it's a little bit longer, but it is one of the Tactica videos, and I think it's really important to kind of understand and think about how would you use a sniper and what makes a good sniper, and what kind of qualities you would look for in a sniper. I hope you enjoyed this video. Give us a thumbs up below, like and subscribe, yada, yada. Otherwise, may the blessings of Blake be upon you.